Hello, fantasy football fans. Welcome to the Nine Route, the fantasy football show that goes deep to help you win. I'm your host, Austin Lee, and I'm joined as always by fellow Football Guys writer, Alex Miglio. How you doing, man?
Hey, man. I'm doing great. I am very excited to have Bob Harris on the show.
The legend.
Legendary Bob Harris, who has graciously graced us with his presence tonight on the show. Thanks for coming on, Bob.
Yes, legendary means old. It's a kind way of saying it, and I appreciate that.
No, I would have said mythological or historical.
He's like a Pegasus? Is that what you're saying? Dude, we're really excited to have you on the show, so thank you for joining us. You're our first guest on the Nine Route, and it is an honor to have you as our first guest on the Nine Route.
Well, that's outstanding. I'm proud to be the first guest on this fine multicast, I guess it is.
Yes, we wouldn't have it any other way. And tonight we're going to talk about news, injuries, our rankings, and we're going to get some daily fantasy sports tips from Mr. Bob Harris, and we're going to discuss kind of general strategy a bit. And we're going to also talk about our DFS picks of the week, especially for that big $1 million maker over at DraftKings that's this week for a $27 entry. So stay tuned for that. We'll get to that in the end, and we'll have your Twitter questions as well to cap things off. But to start things off, we're a quarter of the way through the season, guys, minus some buys here and there. How are you feeling? Are you psyched about the season, Bob? How are you feeling about this season so far?
Ambivalent? No, I'm pretty psyched. I mean, there are some great players emerging, but I think we're learning some lessons. I think we can all say that next year, many fewer running backs will be going first round next year. I mean, the guys down, the guys in that next tier kind of stepping up, but it's kind of what we already knew. I just think at this point we're all realizing that maybe it's time to invest more heavily in the receiving end of the game than the running end of the game, because there's going to be guys that emerge and come out of nowhere and do things that we don't expect, or just do a little more than we expect. And the top guys, they're kind of risky picks, it looks like.
Yeah, I gotta hand it to the guys who came up with the zero running back theorem this past off season. It was a big thing.
The upside down draft. I mean, same thing, except that Matt Waldman's been doing it for 1,000 years, almost as long as I've been alive.
Yeah, it's kind of, shout out to football guys, Matt Waldman for sure.
Basically, we're in a big cycle. Everything happens all over again. But so. I agree. I think that this year the running backs are killing teams who drafted most of them in the first round, and we'll see how it goes going forward. But definitely guys like LaShawn McCoy, Eddie Lacy, even Jamal Charles until last week were killing their teams.
All right.
Yep. And a couple of bits of news before we dive into some of the injuries. It sounds like Kyle Orton is going to be taking over for E.J. Manuel in Buffalo. This is something that maybe we saw coming with the signing of Orton in the offseason. Is this something that changes the fantasy value of the Buffalo playmakers here? How do you feel about Orton, Bob? What do you think about this situation?
Did we lose Bob?
Nope. We may have lost Bob.
No, I'm there. It seems a bit inevitable. I mean, when they did sign him, assuming that E.J. Manuel was going to be E.J. Manuel, I think we kind of expected that at some point, they didn't pay Kyle Orton $5 million to hold a clipboard. They paid him $5 million for when they decided that Manuel couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, that it was time to bring in the veteran. It was interesting, Sammy Watkins, Robert Woods already talking today how he's more in command and how the ball's really zipping at him. And, I just think, for me, the change means I'm a little more interested in those guys. I'm not really looking to play Orton. That may come at some point, maybe a super flex kind of option or something, or a cheap DFS play. But I think for right now, it just gives you a little hope that guys like Watkins, Robert Woods, Mike Williams can pick up the pace a little bit more.
I tell you what, you can pay me half of what Kyle Orton is getting paid to hold a clipboard. I would totally take that on. If anybody's out there, if any NFL teams need a clipboard holder for $2.5 million, I'm your man. But
I've seen Alex. He's a really good clipboard holder.
You have to be bigger than the clipboard, Miglio.
Oh. That's true.
No, but I agree with Bob. I totally agree with Bob that this really affects forget grabbing Orton on the waiver wire. I don't think that necessarily he's, maybe he'll have a couple big weeks. Maybe he'll be good in DFS. Maybe, this week he'll probably be pretty cheap. But it really affects guys like Sammy Watkins, Robert Woods, even Scott Chandler. Maybe CJ Spiller will benefit. I think that we've seen him kind of go downhill ever since EJ Manuel was a quarterback. So perhaps he breaks out now that Kyle Orton's a quarterback.
I think it can't hurt, that's for sure. So it'll be interesting to see how Orton impacts this offense coming this next week. I agree with everything you guys are saying there. Fortunately, after last week's 6 teams on bye, we get a little bit of a reprieve with only Oakland and Miami on the bye this week. So not a whole lot of playmakers there that we're worried about missing out on. But we are worried about missing out on some of the guys that are injured this week or trying to come back from injury. One of those guys who's trying to come back is Carson Palmer. And what we're hearing is that he may be a no-go this week. It sounds like he's still struggling. Bob, are you hearing anything different? What do you think about Carson Palmer and the situation in Arizona there?
I think it's probably, in terms of, weekly lineups, it's time to move on past him this week. The setback, they're talking about it as a setback. He threw some last week, and then when he threw early this week, he was, had some more inflammation in the shoulder, went to get a second opinion. I mean, we're, a month into this, and he's getting, or 3 weeks into this, and he's getting a second opinion. Never a good sign. I just think it's, it makes sense to go with Stanton right now unless there's some kind of miraculous turnaround, and I don't expect there to be. When Bruce Arians was talking today, he also mentioned we're not thinking about putting him on IR. Well, season-ending IR. He conceded that, short-term IR is a possibility. I think that says it all. I think you can count on Stanton. And look, Stanton has shown he can get the job done. He's familiar with the offense, well-versed, knows Arians' system well. He seems to equally divide up, one game to Floyd, one game to Fitzgerald. So I think, he can get the job done just as well to me for now. I mean, I would rather have Palmer in there, but I think I could live with Stanton if I was an owner of Floyd, Fitzgerald, or one John Brown.
Yeah, what do you think, Alex? Do you think that the pass catchers there get a slight downgrade here with Palmer? I'm kind of thinking they get a little bit of a downgrade here, but we never really got to see Palmer in full-fledged offense for very much this season anyway. What's your take, Alex?
Drew Stanton's been fine. I don't know how much of a downgrade he is from Carson Palmer. I think marginal at best, at worst. So I don't really downgrade them too much. Larry Fitzgerald was already a big disappointment for fantasy owners. Michael Floyd's kind of been up and down. We know that Floyd had the rapport with Palmer early this offseason, so hopefully he can transfer that over to Stanton. And we saw what John Brown could do a couple weeks ago. He had 2 touchdowns with Stanton at quarterback. So we'll see. I'm actually, we talked about Fitzgerald a little bit last week and how I think he's a bounce-back candidate. With Stanton in there, I'm not sure so much, but he is still the number 1 receiver there, and I expect him to get targets. We'll see if Stanton provides some catchable ones.
Yeah, definitely. And we are also hearing about some setbacks for Noshawn Moreno. It sounds like he's going to be out a few extra weeks. Originally, there had a timetable for him that was coming back week 6 after their bye this week. Alex, are you excited about Lamar Miller getting a couple of extra weeks without Moreno sort of sharing carries there in Miami?
Yeah, I was about to put him in my sell high this week because I thought Moreno was going to be back next week, and I saw the news that Moreno might be out another 4 weeks, so that gives Miller at least probably 2 or 3 weeks before Moreno really starts to cut into his playing time. And Miller's been playing well. He's averaging 5.7 yards a carry, I think. I think he's second in the league right now in yards per carry. And granted, some of the competition hasn't been the top notch. He annihilated the Raiders last week, so not quite the best sample there. But I think that he's going to be the man. He's going to get probably 18 to 20 touches a game right now, and that's valuable, even if he's not as efficient as he has been.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Bob, we're also hearing that Teddy Bridgewater may miss this week's game, and maybe Christian Ponder is going to be starting for the Minnesota Vikings. What does this spell disaster for the Minnesota Vikings if Ponder is their starter this week?
It spells disaster for my plans to play any Vikings. I think. Yeah, I don't like to be too reactionary. Offenses, even ones with bad quarterbacks, tend to get something done. But it certainly takes some of the luster off, what maybe your expectations were, especially after a big game. Granted, it was against the Falcons, but Teddy Bridgewater seems to bring a lot of energy to that team. I doubt Ponder will bring that same energy. I'm thinking a big night. If all goes according to their plan, a big night for Asiata, grinding the clock and keeping the Packers off the field. If not, a lot of throwing by Ponder, and maybe someone benefits in garbage time. You'd like to think that they can get Cordero Patterson more involved. I heard some kind of talk that Norv Turner was going to design 1,000 of plays for him and turn him into this creature that we all expected. We haven't seen it so far. We've seen Jarius Wright be that guy last week. So I'd like to see a little more out of all these guys. I don't think Ponder's the guy that's going to help them show off.
Yeah, that's Jarius Wright. Threw down 8 catches, 10 targets, 132 yards last week, and Asiata and McKinnon actually got in the action pretty heavily last week too. Of course, it was all against the Atlanta Falcons. Alex, we might as well, while we're touching on the Vikings, talk about some of these performances. What do you think about Jarius Wright? Are you buying it? And the backfield in Minnesota, which of these two backs are you most excited about going forward? Matt Asiata or Jerick McKinnon?
That's a very good question. I don't know about Jarius Wright. It's like he stole Cordell Patterson's mojo or something. Last week he looked like like Cordell Patterson should look. So, maybe because he was on the second team offense with Teddy Bridgewater, he had some sort of rapport with him. Just like I thought last week, but we talked about this last week. Mike Glennon and Mike Evans had that rapport, and then lo and behold, he's targeting Mike Evans like crazy at the beginning of the game, threw that touchdown before Evans went out of the game with an injury. Maybe the same thing with Wright. This week, if what's his name? I don't even remember his name. Christian Ponder.
Oh, Ponder, yeah. Their third string quarterback.
Mr. Samantha Ponder is the quarterback over. I just don't have any confidence this week in anybody. I don't think Asiata's going to do well. I don't think McKinnon's going to do well. I think McKinnon is a guy to own going forward in that backfield, but I see a drubbing in the Minnesota Vikings' future tomorrow if it's Ponder.
What do you think about that, Bob?
It seems like McKinnon is the guy to have over the long haul, right, this season. Asiata is, we know what he is. He'll get you what you block for him. Although I've been a little impressed with him as a receiver. They're getting him some balls out, getting him a little bit. He's getting some targets, and I think that's kind of exciting. One of the concerns with Ponder, you see some of these second-teamers come in and, they tend to hook up with the guys, the second-teamers they work with in practice. Well, all the guys that Ponder was hooking up with practice are all now Coke delivery men or
they're all cut.
Jimmy John's or something, so that's not going to do him well. But I do, I agree totally on the Jarius Wright thing. Our buddy Leo Pasiga from Dynasty League Football writes a weekly column, 3M Report, and the first thing I read Monday morning was that, and why is Jarius Wright getting all those bubble screens that were designed for Cordero Patterson? And I'm just going, really? Why the hell was that? They got to change that, and it seems like he's their most dangerous playmaker. You would think they would realize that it's probably a good week to try to turn him loose. But, my worry about Asiata is they're going to fall way behind, and he won't be a factor, and maybe more McKinnon this week as they try to, scrabble back into the game.
Yeah, I think in my daily fantasy sports league, I'll be starting the guy selling popcorn in the stands because that's, one of the third stringers that's been practicing with Christian Ponder. It seems like a logical connection.
Yes, it is. Totally.
I tell you what, I think that Christian Ponder is going to go for 18 for 34 for 120 yards and run for a touchdown. And everybody else, nobody's going to have a good fantasy day.
That sounds brutal.
I just wrote that down. I'm holding you to it.
Well, are we going to find any fantasy nuggets in the Carolina backfield this week? It sounds like, at one point we were making fun of Carolina for signing way too many running backs, and now we're just like pulling guys off the street and throwing them into the lineup. It sounds like everyone's hurt over there. Bob, do you think there's any hope for fantasy relevance in Carolina's backfield this week?
No. Their best running back is nursing that ankle, Cam Newton, and he's not going to run well either. And so the rest of those guys, playing catch as catch can. I mean, Darren Reeves. I mean, I just don't see any reason why you would go that direction. I suppose, if Jonathan Stewart turns out to be, active and playing, the 5 plays he'll give you will probably be really cool until he gets off the field. So, no, I'm not, honestly, if you think about it, maybe Chris Avenaya is the guy as a receiving threat that would be a sneaky play if you were like in this total, if it was By-Mageddon again this week like it was last week. If you were in this horrible pinch for help at running back, maybe that would be the guy I look for if I had to pick from one of them. But I don't have to pick from one of them, and I'm not picking any of them. To hell with all of them.
Yeah, you tell him, Bob Harris. Yeah. This backfield's a wasteland even when they're healthy.
Anyone can do anything on any given week, but I'm going to let someone else be the hero. If you beat me with Darren Reeves, good on you.
You know what? I after Jonathan Stewart put up 4 points 2 weeks ago in a few of my DFS lineups, and D'Angelo Williams put up 3.4 points last week. I'm tempted to get Darren Reeves at 3,000 over at DraftKings, but I don't think I'm going to do it. It's just ridiculous.
What about that makes you tempted? There's never points coming out of that backfield. It's usually like
it's the price, scoring a touchdown. I don't think I can do it. It's that I'm gonna get hosed.
Friends don't let friends take Darren Reeves in DFS. I don't do it.
I mean, honestly, outside of Benjamin and Olsen, are there any Panthers you're eager to get in your lineup?
No. Those are the guys. I'm eager to get those guys, but nobody else.
Yeah, I'm with you.
But guys that maybe we can start counting on again, Jamal Charles. We were getting a little nervous. He kind of had a slow start to his season, but then he hosed the Patriots on Monday night. Let's talk about Jamal Charles. He had 108 total yards, 3 touchdowns. He looked like the Charles of last season. Alex, are you excited about Charles going forward? Is he back to -- running back status now?
Yes.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no.
He
no
looked
doubts.
fantastic. His performance was spoke for itself. We saw now Davis break some big runs, and I think that he's going to be a big part of that offense going forward. But Jamal Charles got all of the goal line work, and that is aside from the fact that he can break one at any time, and he's a good pass catching back. I think that speaks volumes. He's going to be the goal line back. He's going to catch passes at the goal line. And, the emergence of guys like Travis Kelce who can take linebackers away with, if teams are going to have to start paying attention to Travis Kelce. There's no more Anthony Fasano just plodding along that nobody has to worry about. So I really like what I saw from Charles on Monday, and I expect a lot more of that.
Yeah, it's good to finally have him back looking like his old self. Now, on the other side of the ball, we saw a lot of bad play by New England Patriots players. Bob, are you ready to drop Tom Brady? Is there any fantasy love in this New England offense at all? Who you got your eye on here?
I mean, I'll still play Gronk. I might play Kelce over him, but I'll still play him. He's still going to score his touchdowns. I think Edelman in PPR is still a viable play. The problems that, when you look across the league at teams that are having serious problems, the root tends to be the same in all of them, offensive line play. I mean, it's just been abysmal, and Rodney Harrison had I don't know if Tom Brady's petrified, but he sure knows he's about to get whacked every time he drops back, and I do think that makes a difference. And the other thing for Brady is, every time I've been talking to beat writers in New England since Brady's been there. And ever since the Chad Ochocinco, you've heard a lot of people say the same thing. Unless Tom Brady trusts you, unless he knows you're going to be where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be there, he's not interested in throwing to you. Looks like he's gaining a little trust in Brandon LaFell. But hell, Kimbrell Tompkins, Darren Dobson, those guys aren't on the field enough. I guess Dobson mouthed off to Josh McCown or Josh McDaniels, and that's why he's been inactive the last 2 weeks for back-talking the coach. Tompkins don't know what the deal is, but they can't get on the field. You're not going to establish that trust. So I think the limited number of weapons is part of the issue along with the offensive line. And, that's without even getting into the running backs, neither of whom you can start, because untying that Gordian knot of goofiness that they run, it's not going to happen. You're not going to know in advance of the game what the game plan is, and you're not going to know which back is going to get the bulk of the work. It's a mess.
It's frustrating for fantasy owners for sure. Alex, you had something?
Let me ask you a question, Bob. If a fantasy owner proposed to trade you Tom Brady for a roast beef sandwich, would you take Tom Brady?
I do not eat roast beef, so I would probably counter with a turkey on rye, and yes, I would take it.
You're giving up the sandwich. You're getting Tom Brady.
I'm getting time. No, I don't want that. I want my sandwich.
Yes, point well taken. And I think Bob makes a good point about offensive line issues. I mean, we're seeing it in New England. We're seeing it with Atlanta in a big way. The Eagles are struggling. Green Bay is struggling. Some of these guys that we thought were going to be in high-powered offenses, their offensive line is just getting obliterated. And if they can figure that out, I think we'll see comebacks from some of these guys, but it's going to take some time. I don't think we're going to see quick turnarounds on these offensive lines from any of these teams that are really struggling a lot. Brandon LaFell, I don't think I can buy this guy as a viable start. I just don't trust it. Do either of you guys buy LaFell as maybe like a flex play or like a desperation play on a bye week?
I'm not buying him. What you said about the offensive line, though, is something to note. Is you've got really no options when your offensive line goes in the tank. I was talking to Ted Sunquist, the former Broncos GM, and he said, every GM has a list of guys that when you get in a bye, you call. He says, you look at that list, and everybody's list, there are no offensive linemen who could come in and play for you on anybody's list because they're all on teams. All the guys who can play are playing. So you either have a choice of, going with what you got, but you've got to coach those guys up. And sometimes, you saw it in Arizona last year. They kind of coached their guys up. They started out a little lame, and they were able to coach their guys up. I think in New England, you've got an issue with the coaching there. They made a coaching change, the offensive line coach. That maybe is part of the issue. And in Atlanta, the injuries and attrition are the issue. And you look at the flip side of that coin. If you have an offensive line, what can't you do, said the Dallas Cowboys? Nothing.
Yeah, it's a total mess. That's a great point. Yeah, and that's why there's no quick fix for this kind of thing, and it's impacting. Yeah, and it's impacting a couple of really key fantasy players that were drafted in the first round in LaShawn McCoy and Eddie Lacy, who have, fantasy owners have been very frustrated with these two guys. Alex, I'm wondering, is it panic time for these two running backs? If you can still get first round value for either of these guys, are you trading them away, or is there one of these guys you're more hopeful to make a turnaround than the other, McCoy and Lacy?
I would prefer having LaShawn McCoy. I think that, unfortunately, he took a really nasty hit a couple of games ago, and it looked like he was concussed. I was shocked he came back in the game. And he came back in, wasn't effective when he came back in, and he looked out of sorts last week. He just was not himself. I love watching him play, and he just didn't look like himself. So I'm hoping that it was something that he can overcome physically soon. I'm hoping that there's not something more underlying. But yeah, offensive line play hasn't helped. They get Lane Johnson back this week from suspension. Hopefully that'll help solidify things along that offensive line. And I'd rather have him. He's more dynamic. He's more dangerous than Eddie Lacy, who I like and I think I would still trade for. But Lacy, he scored the touchdown last week. He still was not impressive on the ground. I keep thinking that he's a good buy low candidate, but he's just not doing well. He's like Trent Richardson Part 2, only he's on a better offense, which is good for him. And he's also getting a ton of playing time. I think he got like all but 2 snaps last week. So.
Yeah. Hopefully both of these guys can turn things around. Bob, do you have a take on Lacy and McCoy?
Yeah, interesting article today by Tom Silverstein in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, just talking about one of the problems for Lacy has been adjusting to. If you look back to last year, when he really came on was when Aaron Rodgers got hurt, and when Matt Flynn came in, they went more with the quarterback under center, and so he's running out of more of a traditional I formation, which he's very familiar with. Whereas now he's running with Aaron Rodgers out of the shotgun in the no huddle, and it's been an adjustment, and he's not used to, taking the ball, right from the quarterback out of the shotgun, and that's been a little bit of a problem. Mike McCarthy suggested he needs to be a little more patient. I think he still has a chance to come on. He'll make that adjustment. I mean, we saw the talent last year when he's allowed to do what he does. I just think he needs to make the adjustment. Don't know how long it'll take. And on McCoy, I agree. I think, Lane Johnson coming back, let some of the other guys move around. Todd Harriman's, can go back to right guard. I mean, it makes some adjustments that will make, it's not just Lane Johnson coming back, but some of the shuffling they can do will help. I agree. I think, for me, McCoy is the guy that's most likely to be McCoy because he's just the talent and the speed is still there, although we didn't see a lot of it in San Francisco last week. I do think that he's, it's only been 2 lousy games. They've been really lousy, but the 2 games before that were not anything close to miserable. I mean, the numbers were almost bearable. They weren't, exactly what you wanted. So I do have some hope for McCoy and eventually for Lacey, a guy that I drafted a fair amount. So maybe just my own personal hopes.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about those first 2 games. I think fantasy owners tend to get a little jumpy about what have you done for me lately, and his past 2 games have been miserable, but the first 2 games were serviceable, and I think we're going to see that version of LeSean McCoy eventually. Alex, you had something on this?
Well, it wasn't just that he looked bad last week against the 49ers. It's that the offense just didn't get anything going. And they didn't have to for the first half of the game. They were just completely dominant on defense and special teams, which was just the whole game flow was thrown out of whack after that. And I think that also affected McCoy. They basically couldn't hold on to the lead and just didn't get anything going on offense, for the whole game.
Yeah, good points. They had those 3 return touchdowns and didn't have to really do anything. Let's move on to our rankings, and then we'll go to some daily fantasy sports stuff. Alex and I have a few players that we differ on, and Bob, we're going to get your sort of tiebreaker opinion on some of these guys.
Excellent.
First off, awesome. So first off, we've got Jay Cutler. He's at Carolina this week, and Alex has him as QB 16. I have him as QB 9. Alex, first, tell me why you're a little bit down on Cutler this week.
Well, he's on the road, and Carolina hasn't been good the last couple of weeks by any stretch of the imagination, so I take that with a grain of salt. But I think that he's on the road. I think that I don't hate Cutler, but in terms of rankings, I like a lot of guys ahead of him. So, he could post a top 10 day, but given that they might try to get Forte involved a lot this week. Just because they're on the road, I think they're going to try to grind some clock. I just don't love him.
Yeah, I'm starting to warm up to him more because it sounds like Brandon Marshall's finally starting to get healthy. It seems like the weapons are going to be a lot healthier this week than they have the past 2 weeks, and Carolina's defense hasn't looked as strong as I thought they were going to be when we were coming into the season. Bob, how are you feeling about Cutler this week?
I'm kind of buying some of what both of you are saying. I think, for me, I think Brandon Marshall coming back is getting a full practice today, kind of surprising considering, 2 days ago people were talking, maybe it's time to give him a week off. Maybe, and even Mark Trestman kind of hinted at it, and sounds like that's all gone by the wayside. If he's got his full receiving core and the way Martellus Bennett is playing, and, I was talking to John Mullen from CSN Chicago Sunday, and he said Martellus Bennett, one of the things he did this summer in dating back to the OTAs was worked really hard with Cutler to show him, to throw high to him, to trust to throw high so Bennett could go up and get the ball. He's 6'6", basketball player. He's done that pretty well. I think he's been a big difference maker. So I think I'm going to go a little higher than 16. And the Panthers' defense has not been scaring anybody. At least that's what Steve Smith told me.
Yeah, that's very true. And a couple of players that Alex and I have interesting takes on are Giants players this week versus Atlanta. They're playing this in New Jersey. Minnesota obliterated the Falcons last week, and maybe we can expect a lot of the same this week. Alex and I are both really high on Rashad Jennings, even though he didn't have a big week last week. Bob, are you expecting a big game out of Jennings? Alex and I both have him in our top 5 at running back this week.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of with you this week. I have him pretty high as well, also in my top 5. And I think, one of the reasons for last week, in addition to the passing attack clicking really well, but I mean, the week before he had the huge workload, then the short turnaround to Thursday, there was chatter going into the game that maybe we'd see a little more Andre Williams just because of that, because of the short turnaround and the heavy workload the week before. I think it normalizes a little bit more this week. Sounds like they could get Odell Beckham back. That opens things up even more, a guy that can actually get down the field a little bit and press defenses more so than the guys that have been. I'm buying Jennings this week. I want some of that.
And I think the thing with Jennings last week, too, against the Redskins, is that they didn't need him to play later in the game. I watched a lot of this game, and it really seemed like they were using him heavily early in the game, and then, they're like, just give him a rest. We don't need to put any, wear any more tread on these tires because we got the game at hand. On the other side of things, with Victor Cruz, Alex is a little higher on Cruz than I am. Alex, talk about Victor Cruz in this matchup. You have him as wide receiver 8.
I like the matchup all around for that offense. I think that it's going to be a big scoring game for the Giants. I think it's going to be some high scoring game overall. It could be something like 35 to 28 or something like that, or 31. And so I like Cruz a lot against the Falcons are not as good on the road. We saw what Jarius Wright did to them last week. That defense and Cruz is that kind of receiver, I think. I just like him a lot this week.
Yeah, I think I need to come up on Cruz a little bit. I have him at wide receiver 20 right now, mostly because I have the hardest time just trusting Cruz's production and just trusting that he's going to be consistent. But it just seems like a great matchup here. Bob, how do you feel about this?
I'm kind of between you guys, right in the 15 range. But, for me, Larry Donnell is going to score all the touchdowns. So that's just, apparently. So, or another tight end that we never heard of. So I guess for me, Cruz, he drops too many balls still for my liking, but that doesn't mean he's not going to catch enough to keep me happy. I do like the matchup. I'll just say, the NFL, proves to us each and every week that it is a week-to-week league, and as much as we want to buy into the matchups and follow the logic of them, they play with the oblong spheroid, and it bounces funny ways, and the flow of the game can dictate a lot. So we'll see how it plays out. I wonder if this isn't the game the Giants just decide to run roughshod on a defense with Jennings and maybe a little more Andre Williams, and then throw those short touchdown passes to Donnell. Nonetheless, I still think Cruz is a viable play for all the reasons that Alex said. The matchup seems to be very favorable.
Yeah, I could easily see it being a running and tight end game for the Giants. I'm a bit of a Falcons fan, and I just think they're going to get thrashed. That's unhappy times for me. Their offensive line looks horrible.
We're all expecting a high-scoring game, and so now that we've said that, it's going to be 17-13, and it's going to be a pick six and a punt return, and that's it.
Black. One last guy we want to talk about rankings on before we get to DFS is Brian Quick. He was on the bye last week. He gets the Philadelphia defense that has not shown its ability to slow down anything generally. Alex, you're a little higher on Quick this week than I am. You have him as wide receiver 29. What are you seeing here?
I just like the matchup. The Eagles are not very good in pass defense. They held down the San Francisco receivers a little bit last week, but San Francisco's offense isn't very good overall either. So I expect Quick to have a nice game. I think that it could be one of those things where the Eagles get out to a big lead against the Rams at home, and we could see a lot of passing from Austin Davis, and Quick's been getting a lot of targets. He's been the number one receiver in that offense, so I think that I would expect something like 7 or 8 targets with maybe 5 or 6 receptions and a touchdown.
The interesting thing here for me is the return of Stedman Bailey, and he showed really well late last year, and he's been out on suspension, and that's why I have Quick a little bit lower than you, but I still like Quick a lot in this scenario. Bob, do you think that Bailey's going to influence this offense this first week back?
Yeah, I will see. Certainly in the preseason he was very impressive. I just think Quick is a guy where it all clicked. He's one of those guys that comes from a small school, had all the physical attributes coming in. We've seen guys do this before. They come in, the body by Porsche, brains by Mattel kind of thing, where they just. It takes them a while to click with the offense. A guy named Terrell Owens was kind of like that, right? Took him a little time to understand the offense coming from a small school. Some guys never click. They have all that athleticism.
Stephen Hill.
Yeah. That's kind of how it goes. But he seems to have clicked, and I think, with Austin Davis in there, he's ranked pretty high among quarterbacks right now. I think Quick is a pretty good play this week. And the matchup being one reason, and just the physical attributes of this guy, I love him.
Yeah, yeah. Before we move on to the DFS stuff, Bob, for those of you who are listening to the audio version of this later on, Bob has basically like a sports bar set up behind him with about 100 television sets. It's fantastic. I also see like an action figure kind of over on a bookshelf. What is that action? What is that character over there on the shelf? He's going to get it. He's going to get it. What? I'm gonna switch cameras to you and see. Oh wow, it's Pinhead. Oh geez, I'm gonna have nightmares now. Yikes. Okay.
All right. I hope you're happy with yourself.
Yeah, I'm. If we edited this thing.
Is your curiosity sated, sir?
Yeah, I will not be curious. Curiosity killed the cat.
I have some better ones, but I don't think we can show them in a family show.
They're in a special room.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit of daily fantasy sports strategy. Bob, we want to pick your brain a little bit on this. You have seen the evolution of the fantasy game over many years. I've heard wonderful stories about how the invention of the fax machine changed the fantasy landscape at a certain point, and so now all the fast forward to now where daily fantasy sports is sort of hot on the scene.
Again, Bob is a legend.
He's a legend. He's a legend. Can you tell us what's kind of your favorite thing about daily fantasy sports?
It just changes the whole way. Everything you hate about redraft and season long goes away. That's it, right? I mean, in addition to being able to win some cash every week, I just think that it makes all the things that you hate about, season-long fantasy football. I mean, and that doesn't mean you can't still love it, but we all hate the same things about it. A guy gets hurt, a guy's not doing well, you don't like a matchup, you don't want to play your best stud this week. You don't have to. All that just goes away, and to me, it's kind of a nice change of pace after playing, regular fantasy football for 30-plus years. All of a sudden, here's this new thing that, oh, wow, I can play whoever I want. I mean, I think it's a great idea. The money makes it that much better. I don't think people are going to be able to get enough of it. It's only going to grow.
Yeah, it's been really exciting to dig deeper and deeper into this DFS world over the past couple of years. And do you have any advice for newcomers to daily fantasy sports, Bob? Where if they haven't tried it yet, what's something you would tell them if it's their first time trying it, or what would you tell them to sort of push them to get into it a little bit?
First of all, just try it. I mean, once you try it, you're kind of hooked on it. I dabbled a little bit last year. Now I'm actually playing a little more actively this year. Some of it associated with my Sirius show. Just some of it just to try it out and get a better feel for it. And once you get into it, you can't lose out. But I think, it makes you look more closely at the matchups because you have the whole array. I mean, everything is available to you. It makes you pay attention to the value of the players. You kind of got to have a few strategies going in, what you're going to play, whether, where you're going to spend the bulk of your cap. Are you going with the studs at which position? It allows you to look for guys that are going to be cheap, that are going to have great matchups. I think, the various kind of leagues, the head-to-head leagues, the tournament, I mean, there's different ways to play as well within the daily game. And I was talking to Chris Prince today. I'm surprised he's not staring at me from one of the television boxes. He's usually leery. But, he had some great takes today just talking about, in head-to-head, you want to play the guys with, the high floors. In the tournament play, you want to go after the guys with the high ceilings, the big upside guys. And I think I've been learning a lot. I've been having Travis Spieth on, the FanDuel $1 Million winner from last year, as a weekly guest on our show. And he's been giving lots of insight. And I think, what else do you need to know than I have a guy on my radio show every week who spent $10 last year and won $1 million.
There you go, exactly. And that's a reminder that, listen to Bob on Sirius for sure. He's got a great show on there. Be sure to catch it all the time. Don't miss it. Don't miss it.
Every day now. You get to hear Bob every single day. It used to be twice a week. Congratulations, by the way.
Got a little out of hand.
Alex, why don't I pitch it to you a little bit for some DFS strategy? Is there anything that you would advise to people based on your DFS experience? Do you have something that you try to do with your teams each week?
It's an interesting question. Like Bob, I dabbled in the past year and got more into it this year because I felt more comfortable. I think that I did a decent job last year, and so my strategies, kind of overarching strategies, are not quite as sophisticated as some people who have are the grinders who play hundreds of lineups every week. But like Bob said, play the high upside guys. I do a lot of tournaments. I don't do a lot of head-to-head. Just not my style. And you and I were kind of discussing this offline a little bit last week, but I basically pick my favorite lineup, and I go with the bigger money games with that lineup. But I play around and I do some other fun lineups that have won me some money as well. So I think that we've talked about it in the past where you do one lineup for everybody, and I do a bunch of different lineups. A lot of those different lineups don't win me anything. So maybe I should go with what you do.
No, I don't know. Go ahead, Bob.
It was interesting because I mostly do tournaments too. But something that Alex said, I mean, when I talk to all the guys that are the grinders that play constantly, that's their thing. They'll, if they're playing in multiple leagues, they'll get a core of like 6 guys, and they'll, mostly play them, and then kind of fill in around them with various guys. And a lot of times in the tournaments, the guys will tell you have to have the differentiation. You have to have some other different guys that other people aren't playing. And that's where those high upsides, those cheap guys, and you're really playing the matchups. I think it really forces you to really look at the matchups more closely and take a lot more chances. But, at the same time, you can kind of play it safe because you're still going with that core of studs that you have a lot of confidence in. It's a fun game.
Yeah, it's totally a fun game, and I would say for the newer folks, you can try it for free on these sites. There's free games to try it out, so go try that out, see if you like it. And the other thing is if you're going to start taking it more seriously, definitely read up on bankroll management. There's tons of articles out there on bankroll management. We've got some of those over at Football Guys from guys who've been doing a lot of grinding over the past few years. Bankroll management will save your bacon if you learn about that before you sort of dive in more seriously into multiple contests in the same week. And speaking of multiple contests, we've got a huge contest coming up at DraftKings this week. They've got their Millionaire Maker contest. You pay $27. Top prize is $1 million. Someone's going to be a millionaire after the Monday Night Football game this week. Let's talk about some of our picks at DraftKings that will hopefully help somebody become a millionaire, or at least give them some ideas for guys to put into their lineup. Alex, you've dug into this a bit, and so have I. Who's the quarterback that stands out to you that you want to make sure you get into your lineup?
Well, I'll tell you what, we were talking about strategies earlier, and I'll go into my favorite quarterback for this week. But last week I did pretty well, and I stacked Phillip Rivers and Keenan Allen in a lot of the leagues that I did well in. So for me this week, that stack is, I did this a couple weeks ago, but again, it's Russell Wilson and Percy Harvin. Harvin wound up having a decent day thanks to the overtime. He saved my bacon there a little bit, but I really like Russell Wilson and Percy Harvin on the road against Washington, which the defense is just horrendous over there. And Wilson, I don't have Harvin's price up, but Wilson's price is pretty good. It's $7,600 for a guy who's probably going to have top 5 or 6 day. I think is pretty good.
Yeah, definitely. The guy that I like is Rivers again this week. I mean, Rivers is a guy I used a lot last week. He's still only $7,000. He's got the Jets, and their secondary is kind of weak this week. And then, if you wanna throw a dart on a guy that's kind of low priced, Alex, would you throw a dart at Kyle Orton? Bob, what do you think? I'll pitch it to Bob. Would you throw a gamble at Kyle Orton at bottom basement prices at $5,000?
Probably not. I mean, it depends on what the lineup is. I mean, I think that's where you use Kyle Orton if if you've gone heavy at the other positions and you're looking for a low-end quarterback, value-wise. He seems like a guy who could come up with a decent game. I also like Rivers. Played him heavily last week. I'll be playing him some again this week. I'll probably be playing Ben Roethlisberger alongside with Antonio Brown some too this week, and try and catch on the same matchup I did last week.
Yeah, I think that's a good pairing. And at running back, I'm really, we talked about Jennings a little bit earlier in the show. Jennings is only 5,500 going up against Atlanta. I think that's a steal. If he had not dropped a touchdown catch last week, he would have had a much better fantasy day. And I think that he's going to turn things around this week and have a big showing against Atlanta at 5,500. Alex, who's another running back that you like here?
Well, we talked about Darren Reeves. Maybe we should avoid that backfield though. Giovanni Bernard. I don't know why he's having such low prices every week. Last week he had the bye, but he's only 6,700. For me, he's a top tier guy who's going to catch a lot of passes. He seemed to be the goal line guy a couple weeks ago. After a week after Jeremy Hill got a lot of action, so I like him a lot. And Matt Bradshaw, who he's a little bit. I'm a little bit wary of him season long, but as long as he's producing week to week, he's only 4,000. I think that's a really good deal for him.
Yeah, Bob, what do you think of those picks, or do you have a running back you have your eye on?
I love Bradshaw. I've been playing him almost every week in a lot of my contests because he is a great value who's been putting up great points. Anyone in that Indy offense, I mean, he seems to be the leader of the way, certainly in the backfield, but getting it done as a runner and receiver. So I like him a lot. I think Jennings for 5.5, 5.5 is a great price. I'd be playing some of that too.
Yeah, and we want to keep a little eye on Bradshaw. He did sort of leave last week's game in a boot, but it sounded like it wasn't that serious, and he's going to play.
He's listed on the injury report as not injury related today, so the foot isn't even an issue for him.
Awesome. That's cool. And that's the nice thing about the weekly game, right? I mean, it's like Bradshaw's injury risk all season long, but if you only have to commit to him for 1 week, hey, go for it. At 4,000, why not? Bob, are there any wide receivers that you have your eye on this week at DraftKings?
I think Eddie Royal's the guy that everyone, really reasonable price, 4.4 thousand. I think that, you look back to last year, what he was doing the same thing until he got beat up. And it has something to do with Mike McCoy knows a little something about him from their time in Denver. And he's making heavy use of him. And as long as he's in the locked and upright position, I think you should probably be playing this guy. He's a dangerous threat.
How is Eddie Royal only 4,400? He scored 2 touchdowns 2 games in a row. I have no idea why he's so cheap. He's like free money here.
And this is like not a new thing, but I mean, before the toe and the chest and everything started cropping up last year, he was pulling off a similar thing. I think he had like a little 5 touchdown streak going last year. So, Phillip Rivers is clearly looking his way. It's there's a lot of targets in San Diego, and any of them can deliver at any time. But the last 2 weeks, Royal's the guy that's been delivering.
Yeah, definitely. You could potentially stack the two of those guys this week if you wanted to go with the lower wide receiver cost and not hit with the higher cost of the other wide receiver in San Diego.
Allen.
I'm blanking.
Keenan Allen.
Keenan Allen, yes. Keenan Allen, exactly. Sorry, I had a brain fart there. And then the guy that I really like is Calvin Benjamin here. 4,800. He's been scoring touchdowns. He's the primary target there in Carolina. Cam Newton's not really running so much, so he's got to throw to somebody, and Benjamin's that guy. I like the value there at 4,800. And Alex, it looks like you also have Cooks in New Orleans on your list here too.
Yeah, I really I liked him last week, Brandon Cooks at 4,700, and he kind of let us down, but so did the entire New Orleans team. So, he's gonna catch. I think he's gonna catch a lot of passes this week at home. Drew Brees is better at home. It's a pretty good matchup. He's going up against Tampa Bay, so 4,700. That's pretty good.
Yeah, Bob, let's shift gears to tight ends a little bit here. It seems like there's a couple of guys I keep hearing a lot of people talking about this week in terms of price at DraftKings, and that's Travis Kelce going up against San Francisco and Delaney Walker versus Cleveland. Kelce is $3K and Walker is $4,300. Do you like either of these guys, Bob, or do you have another guy at tight end you're interested in?
I love both of these guys, especially for the price. I mean, for the money, Kelce just seems like his role continues to expand, and they're finally making full use of him as the kind of playmaking threat. One of the reasons Kansas City didn't go after playmaking receiver or, big-name guy in free agency was because this was the plan with Kelce. We finally kind of saw it, especially against New England. He can go down the middle of the field. He draws a lot of coverage. and he still makes the catches. I think for $3,000, that's a pretty good price. But Walker, again, beat up shoulder, limited today, played through it last week. I guess he will play through it again this week, and he's done it no matter who the quarterback's been, and it'll probably be Walker again this week. So, yeah, I could play Walker, love him in all formats of fantasy football.
Yeah, and I think San Francisco is obviously a tough matchup for Kelsey here, but at 3,000, it's hard to ignore. Alex, it looks like you've got some sort of screen share queued up for us there. What do you have going on?
It's a trap.
Admiral Akbar is warning against the trap. Which trap? Are you talking about playing Kelsey at San Francisco?
Yeah, I think that I really like the price. Don't get me wrong, 3,000 for Kelsey is insane after his Monday night performance. Granted, I think they set the prices before that, even though he had the touchdown the week before. But yeah, it feels like you're gonna get sucked in, and he's gonna have 3 catches for 30 yards and get hosed. So I don't know. I like Walker better.
Yeah, I think I'd go with Walker as well, but that's definitely the risk you take. But at 3,000, it's going to be very enticing. At defense, I like the Denver Broncos playing against Drew Stanton of Arizona there at only 2,600. I tend to skimp on defenses and try to sort of start at the bottom of the list and just keep rising up higher and higher until I find one that I can stomach. That way I can save as much cash as I can at other positions. Bob, do you have a strategy for picking defenses? Do you have one that you like this week?
Pick on the quarterback. So Green Bay Packers would be on my list to some degree this week.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. How about you, Alex?
I like the Saints. I mean, I think that not the Saints, the Seahawks, but they're more expensive. They're playing against Washington though. But the Saints are not bad either. I mean, they're at home. I think that might, in the Dome, I think that might affect Mike Glennon. I don't have the stats from when he played them last year in front of me, but I think that they could, maybe have a pick six or just harass him into a few sacks and perhaps a fumble or something.
Yeah. Well, that kind of covers the DraftKings side of thing. Best of luck to all of you playing in the Millionaire Maker. I hope that one of you becomes a millionaire. I know that the 3 of us are in that contest, and we're really looking forward to it. Let's shift over to FanDuel a little bit. They don't have a big $1 million contest this week, but they are the industry leader in terms of number of people at their site, so we always cover the big 2 each week here. Alex, give me a couple of players at any position that you're really high on this week over at FanDuel.
Well, we talked about Rashad Jennings. He's more expensive at FanDuel, but still a pretty good price at $7,200. A guy that I really like at tight end this week that nobody's talking about, and we might have talked. He might be pretty cheap over at DraftKings too. But Luke Wilson with the Seattle Seahawks. Miller's out. Zach Miller is out for a little while, and Luke Wilson's going to start at tight end, and he could have a nice day. I mean, it's a pretty good matchup, and at the 4,500 is below kind of like the $5,000 threshold there at FanDuel. I like him there.
Yeah, Bob, do you have a couple of guys over at FanDuel at all? Do you play over at FanDuel much?
I do play at FanDuel. I think again, picking on the matchup, I might go with Heath Miller this week. I'm eager to play a lot of my Steelers, especially in the passing game. Let's face it, the Jaguars just can't stop anybody. And Miller coming off a pretty reasonable game, and I think he's still a pretty reasonable value. I'm not as big on Luke Wilson. It's a great value. I'm just not sure what I can expect from him. I think there are better targets there, better weapons. Maybe even Lockett is a cheap flyer. I think any of those playmaking receivers in Seattle, he's the one I kind of want, and he's pretty cheap.
Yeah. I think that's a good call. And Alex, I think it's a reasonable pick to think that Eli Manning could repeat some of his success from last week against a terrible Falcons defense. We kind of talked about this before. It's like if you're playing the Falcons, good things are going to happen for your fantasy players. You like Eli this week at FanDuel?
I do. He's not cheap, but he's $7,300 for FanDuel. That's pretty good. And one of his targets I really like is Ruben Randall at $5,400. I think Randall could have a huge game, and that's a really good price.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Let's jump into some of our Twitter questions before.
Wait, we're not going to talk about kickers? I mean,
kickers.
You are talking to the number 2 ranked Kicker prognosticator here. That something that you pointed out to me.
Yes, yeah. So here's the backstory. So over at Fantasy Pros, Alex is the #2 kicker picker, as I like to say, on the season so far. And this is after, in this past offseason, he wrote an article about how lame kickers are for fantasy football and how unpredictable they are. He's the guy that has cracked the code and figured it out.
Yeah. I told you about Dan Carpenter in week 2, and so I guess that set off a chain reaction of good kicker karma, I guess.
Yeah, kicker karma. That's what you got going. And this week your pick kicker is Novak.
Nick Novak.
Nick Novak is coming to town, and I'm gonna mock that pick because I have to mock at least one of your picks every week. And after I mock it, it comes true, and then you. I think that's the whole reason you're doing so well on the kickers is that I usually mock the fact.
It's all because of you, yes.
Yeah. I'm going to take full credit for this. So, some of our Twitter questions. We've got some quick hits at the end of this list. We've got about 8 or 9 questions here. We'll try to breeze through these in 5 minutes and wrap things up. One of the bigger questions we've got asked is from Brad, who has been very supportive on Twitter and such. He's asking, do we have a top buy low or sell high candidate, especially in PPR leagues? Bob, I'm going to pitch it to you. Do you have a buy low or a sell high guy on your mind?
I think the buy low guys that I want right now, if I can talk somebody out of Nick Foles or LaShawn McCoy, I am talking them out of those two coming off horrible games, especially McCoy coming off 2 horrible games. But I think you can get both those cheap. And I would say Julian Edelman, lousy game, but he's been getting it done every week. If someone was probably souring on the entire New England offense, perhaps you could talk them out of Edelman for a reasonable price. Low.
Yeah, I think that I like all those picks actually too. Alex, how about you? Do you have a buy low, sell high kind of guys?
I mean, you can basically get Tom Brady for free, and if you need a bye week fill-in, you could do worse. I think Brady turns it around to some degree at least. So buy really really low on. I mean like we were talking about a ham sandwich earlier. It's just you have to basically be given Tom Brady. And Larry Fitzgerald. I've talked about him. He's been off. He's gotten a lot of targets. He just hasn't had a good reception rate. And in a similar way, Monty Ball, he had a really bad week 3, and then he had the bye week, so he's kind of still has that sour taste in fantasy owners, for fantasy owners after that week. So another buy low guy.
Yeah, I like the Monty Ball pick. I might be targeting Michael Floyd instead of Fitzgerald in that Arizona offense, but I think in general, I think that offense has got to pick things up a little bit as time goes on. So hopefully that gives Brad some options there, some guys to chase. Jill writes us and says Jill is sick of waiting for Justin Hunter to break out and wants to dump Justin Hunter. Bob, do you hang on to Justin Hunter, or are you kind of like this is not the wide receiver we were looking for?
This is not the wide receiver. Ken Wisenhunt's ready to dump him. Hell, I mean, forget about me. Hunter looks like one of those guys that the industry people, are a year early on, which we tend to do. We want to look like the smartest guy in the room, and so we latch on to a guy with great potential that looks to like he's in a good position, in a good situation, and he just doesn't get the job done. He's not getting the job done. It's him. It's not the coaching, the scheme, the quarterback. He's just not getting it done. So, yeah, I'm ready to move on.
Yeah, I like that insight. That I think he's a good dynasty stash, but I think we're a year too early on this guy. I think that's good insight. Alex, how do you handle the situations where you've got a player that is healthy enough to play, but not healthy enough to play well? Like a Jordan Cameron, or we saw with Calvin Johnson. Some of these guys that sometimes come in as decoys. Do you kind of stick with them and hope for the best, or do you go with a lesser option that might be more reliable? This is a question from Jill. Alex, what do you do in these scenarios?
I think if you're looking at a guy who's a stud, who's going to be a top 5 guy when healthy, you have to play them. I think that you live with a bad result if he doesn't have a good game, just like Calvin Johnson last week. But you hope for the best. I mean, we saw what Brandon Marshall did a few weeks ago. Granted, it was a bad idea to start him on with a night game, not knowing if he was going to play, but he was injured and he had a massive game. Similarly with Alshon Jeffrey, he's been injured. He's been playing well. We've seen Calvin Johnson do it before. didn't do it last week. Guys like Jimmy Graham, so yeah, I mean, if they're like a top tier guy, I think you have to stick with them unless they're really, really gimpy, and it's really tough to tell.
Yeah, I think that would be my take as well. You start the studs, and everybody else you just play conservative on. Bob, do you know anything about Matt Prater in Denver? Jack is asking us about Matt Prater. His suspension ends. He won't be playing this week. But do you think he's taking back over for Brandon McManus when he comes back in Week 6? Is this a kicker that's worth a stash?
I'm holding on to him in a few leagues where I have that spare roster spot because I drafted him in a lot of leagues as my only kicker, so I picked someone up. He's an awful lot more expensive than this McManus character. Makes me wonder, maybe this kid has worked his way into a job. I think it's a wait and see. If you have the room, sure, stash Prater, anyone connected with that offense. I want a piece of that, and that's why I've held on to him. But I'm not 100% confident that he's going to be it when he gets back.
Yeah, I think with the shallower bench, you don't worry about it because there's not a guarantee that he actually gets his job back here. I think we'll have to see see how this shakes out a little bit. All right, I've got 4 quick hit questions here. Rest of season questions. This guy or that guy. Alex, I'll pitch it to you first. Would you rather have Niall Davis or Alfred Blue rest of the year?
Niall Davis.
Yeah, what do you think, Bob? Niall Davis or Alfred Blue?
Niall Davis.
Yeah, Davis seems to have the playability for the rest of the year here.
Yeah, maybe as a flex if you need him on a given week.
Yeah, exactly. Bob, how about this pair? Would you rather have Lorenzo Taliaferro or James Starks?
Is this a trick question? I want Darren Reeves. No. I'll go with Taliaferro. I don't think I know Mike McCarthy wants to get Starks more involved or says he does. He hasn't yet. I don't know that he will. Taliaferro seems like a guy that any given week could show up for you. And again, we've got some big bye weeks coming up, weeks 9 and 10. Well, I guess he's in one of those. But I think at some point he might have some value.
Yeah, Alex, how about you? Taliaferro or Starks?
I am scared of the Baltimore Ravens backfield, but I don't really like James Starks. So it's a tough question for me. I think Taliaferro, just because he's younger and could be, the number 2 guy there. But with Bernard Pierce, I think he's gonna actually get to see the field soon. I think it could muddle the situation there.
Yeah, and speaking of Ravens running backs, Adam is asking us about rest of season Bernard Pierce or Latavius Murray. Does the Baltimore backfield scare you enough to go to Murray in this situation?
Why would you go to Murray? I don't understand. I mean, Maurice Jones-Drew's coming back. He was back last week. He didn't play much. Darren McFadden is getting a lot of play, and even Marcel Reese is there. So unless you get points for return yards, because Murray's returning kicks, I would go with Pierce here.
Yeah, I agree on that one. Bob, let's go to the last one here. Brian is asking, in a trade, would you rather have Percy Harvin or Ben Tate rest of the season?
I'll go ahead and go Harvin.
Of course.
I've been a big Harvin guy all along. I think he's a huge playmaking threat. I would have drafted him ahead of Tate probably in most leagues. And Tate's they're going to feed the crow. The crow's going to get fed at some point. I don't know. It's going to be a 3-way split for Tate, even if he's healthy to some degree. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with Harvin.
Yeah, Alex, you agree with that?
Yes.
Yes, definitely. Those are all of our Twitter questions. Thank you guys for writing those in using the hashtag 9route, the digit 9 route. Feel free to send us questions for next week's show. We air every Wednesday night at 9, the 9 route at 9 Pacific.
Which Alex, we just thought of. Bob elucidated that for us tonight because we didn't even think about that until.
Well, I do.
That's what legends do, man. That's what legends do. They're just like everybody else, but they
find an obvious thing that you should know, and they elucidate them for you.
Right, exactly. So, Bob, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. We really appreciate your time, your insight here. Do you have anything that you'd like to promote? Anything you have coming up? Anything you're excited about?
I'm old. I don't get excited often. But you can check out footballdiehards.com. It's a website I have where there's lots of information and other fun stuff and tools and things like that, such like as. And you can catch me Monday through Friday on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio from 5 to 7 Eastern. And you can catch me on the pregame for 3 hours leading up to kickoff every Sunday morning, along with my buddy Elliot Harrison from NFL Network. We do that. Me and Mike Dempsey on during the week. So check us out. We have a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely check you out there. We always do, and you're the man. Thank you so much. Alex, how about you? Any closing thoughts?
I do not have a daily radio show that you can catch, nor do I have a Sunday morning show that you can catch. So go listen to Bob's shows.
I don't have a life, though, so.
But you have way more TV.
I do have a pinhead. I do have a pinhead, though.
Yes.
Oh, I'm going to have nightmares tonight. Hellraiser Pinhead. I think I watched that when I was way too young as a child.
Some say I am pinhead. I don't know.
Well, that's all we have for tonight's show. Be sure to check out the9route.com. That's where we have all things related to the show. You can subscribe to us on iTunes or on Stitcher. We also appreciate your feedback and your ratings and plus ones and things wherever you find our show. Huge thanks to Bob Harris. You can find him on Twitter at FootballDieHard. Bug him with questions. You can find Alex Miglio on Twitter at Alex Miglio. Be sure to send him lots of kicker questions this week. You can find me at Austin NFL. And, Alex and I have our writing over at footballguys.com. You can check out our stuff over there. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, may your players stay healthy, your sleepers wake up, and your Monday nights be filled with miraculous comebacks. Good night.